Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much for being here today and for attending my presentation. Uh, like David said, my name is Anna Hofmeyr. I'm a lecturer at Kansai University, and I'm also doing my PhD at Osaka University. And today I'm going to be talking about the development of intercultural competence through domestic programs. And this was research that was partially funded by JALT research grants in 2018. So I would like also to highlight that. Um, Today, I'll give you a very quick overview of the background and kind of rationale for my research and how I got into this. And then I'll move on to my research focus, how I designed my research, and then to the meatier part of who my participants were, what kind of results did I get. This was a 1-year longitudinal study, so I got a lot of information and some student voices at the end before I discuss the implications of these results. So if you work or have worked at a Japanese university, you know that there is a big emphasis placed on this global jinsai or global human resources and this quest to cultivate globally competent students. And that's a big part of the internationalization of higher education institutions in Japan, and also a big part of the programs developed by MEXT, on the one hand, to attract larger numbers of international students to Japan, and on the other hand, programs to internationalize the universities themselves. So, global human resources was defined by the Council on the Promotion of Human Resource Global Development as those who possess rich linguistic and communication skills and intercultural experiences and thrive internationally. And this was pretty much it. So, it remained, in my opinion, fairly vague. And this was one of the things that attracted me was I wanted to see what is exactly global jinsai and how are global jinsai being fostered, being cultivated by Japanese higher education institutions. In addition, this happens in an environment where not only is the number of international students on Japanese campuses increasing, but actually the number of Japanese students going abroad in mid to long term programs, so semester or full year abroad programs, is decreasing significantly. So within Global Jinsai, I wanted to look at intercultural competence specifically. Global Jinsai does encompass other aspects such as expertise, technical skills, and so on. But I wanted to look at the intercultural competence aspect of Global Jinsai. And intercultural competence has been defined as the ability to communicate effectively and appropriately in intercultural situations based on one's knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So this is very similar or shows similar goals to that of Global Jinsai in Japan. I decided to focus my study on top global universities only because the top global university project is the latest of internationalization projects funded by MEXT. It is still ongoing, so it is possible to see how it is developing and the impact right now. Um, and I wanted to move away from study abroad experiences, which I guess right now with the coronavirus is even more important. And I wanted to look at what internationalization at home, here abbreviated, could do for students who do not go abroad, for students who do not have the means to go abroad, or the students who simply do not want to go abroad for a variety of reasons. And really my focus was on domestic students. So mostly Japanese students who stay in Japan and do not travel abroad. So my two guiding research questions for the study were, does internationalization at home have the potential to generate intercultural competence? And if so, what are the circumstances for its production? I decided to look only at first or to survey only first year students at top global universities because I wanted minimal impact from other variables from being a second or third or fourth year student. Also, I looked at two different kinds of universities within the Top Global University project. Type A universities, which tend to be more research focused, is a national large university with a fairly small ratio of international students, under 10%. Whereas Type E University that I researched is private, is medium sized, but has a much larger ratio of international students than the Type A university. So here I could compare whether multiculturalism on campus was also a factor influences students' intercultural competence. However, the main variable that I really wanted to look at was whether participation in curricular and extracurricular initiatives with an intercultural focus produced any change. And this would be compared with a control group of students who were not taking any extracurricular or curricular initiatives with that kind of focus. Other variables considered, just to make sure they were not interfering with the data, were experience abroad prior to the study, intercultural motivation. So if students chose the university because they wanted to interact with international students, then I use that as a proxy for intercultural motivation. Intercultural interaction outside programs, exposure to multiculturalism on campus, their major, and also their gender. Because intercultural competence is quite a relative term, I wanted to situate this research in the international or the internationalization context. And for that, as a base, I used Theodore Pyramid's model of intercultural competence, which has 22 agreed upon attitudes, knowledge, and skills related to intercultural competence. However, this model is very Western-centric. These agreed upon components were agreed upon by scholars of intercultural competence and higher education administrators, mostly in the US and the UK. And I really wanted to bring the Japanese context into it. So I looked at promotional and policy materials published by MEXT and other governmental agencies regarding the cultivation of global human resources. In addition to that, I looked at the Top Global University website and also at the website of each of the 37 top global universities, looking for hints, I guess, as to what kind of global human resources they were aiming to develop. In the end, when I combined these views of intercultural competence, I ended up with 16 eligible components that were relevant to the Japanese higher education context. And that's what I used to create my survey and to look at students develop throughout the one-year period. So I used a mixed methods design. The first part was a survey in which students had to rate statements related to these components of intercultural competence on a 6-point Likert scale. I also added 3 open-ended questions that I coded for openness and respect to move away from self-report instruments and from student perceptions. And those including meeting international students on campus, part-time work with international groups, and taking a tour in Japan that was aimed at non-Japanese people. And these were coded for acceptance if students showed openness and respect, indirect rejection if they showed only one of the two, and direct rejection if they were not open and not respectful towards the other culture in this hypothetical situation. The surveys were administered at 3 points. The pre-intervention was in early April 2019. Students had just started the academic year. Then a mid-intervention point at the end of the first semester, and the post-intervention point at the end of the academic year. Similarly, I conducted interviews to investigate or to further investigate the factors supporting or hindering the development of intercultural competence on campus. And I conducted 10 interviews in total with 9 students. There was one participant who was interviewed twice. And from these students, 2 were in mixed dorm residences with international students. 2 were in a combination of a residential dorm and a formal program. And 2 were part of the control group and were not enrolled in any programs. And I have to say that I owe a big thank you to all of the teachers who cooperated with me and who passed on this opportunity to answer the survey with their students, because I was not teaching at either of these universities that I researched. And if it hadn't been for that kind of community of teachers helping, that would really not be possible. The interviews were conducted only at the mid-intervention and the post-intervention stage, about 1 month after 1 or 2 months after the surveys. In terms of participants, I managed to get 164 participants for the pre and mid intervention stages, which I was very happy with. This decreased significantly in the post-intervention stage. As you can imagine, it's hard to keep students interested in taking the same survey again and again for a year. But in terms of extracurricular participation, it worked out quite well. I had no control over the type of students who were answering the survey, except for the fact that they were first year students taking English courses. But about 55% acted as a control group. They were not enrolled in any programs that might qualify or might for this study. And then a big percentage were in international or mixed domestic international residential dorms. Some were taking formal programs or a mix of residence and programs. Some were in regular extracurricular programs that we call circles, or in residences and circles. In terms of the university, there was a good balance of students. Students were surveyed from 3 departments: engineering from type A, area studies, and management. Also, a large percentage of students said they were motivated to meet international students on campus, even those at the type A university where the international student ratio was under 10%. In terms of the gender, there was an obvious lack of balance here, a lot more male students than female students, and that is due mainly to the fact that there was a big engineering department being surveyed, and only a few female students were part of this department. Most students had no interaction with international students outside the scope of the program, or very little interaction. And also either none or very little, or had spent none or very little time abroad. And this time abroad included not only study abroad, but also any kind of travel, internship, volunteer experiences that students might have been involved in. And this was one of my goals when I surveyed only first-year students. Okay, in terms of the results, at the baseline point, students felt that they had the attitudes, that they were interested in intercultural contact. They were curious, they were open, they were respectful. But when it came to knowledge, they felt that it was kind of on the borderline before having or not having that kind of intercultural knowledge, knowing about other cultures. And they felt even less confident about intercultural skills, such as English language skills, foreign language skills other than English, or problem-solving skills. And that's even more visible here when you see the agreement levels. They decrease significantly from attitudes to skills. So there's really a big discrepancy here between students' motivation and their perception of knowing how to interact with international students. Here's just a more detailed breakdown, but I'll move on to the intercultural scenarios, which were the open-ended answers. And in this case, openness and respect at this point were really dependent on the situational context. The more formal the situation, the more open students were. The more informal, the less comfortable they felt. And also physical proximity played a role. So if students had the closer they had to be to the international student, the more uncomfortable they felt. Some statistically significant variables at this point were program participation, multiculturalism, on campus, motivation, time spent abroad, and interaction. What this really tells us is that interventions prior to enrollment in higher education institutions might be crucial. And we've really been looking at the internationalization of universities. But students' perceptions of their own intercultural competence influence whether they chose a multicultural campus, whether they chose an intercultural program or joined a program, whether they were willing to interact with international students on campus. At the midterm, you can see that students felt their intercultural knowledge and skills increased, but their intercultural attitudes decreased. So students felt particularly more confident about their English and foreign language skills, but they felt that their openness, curiosity, respect had decreased. However, this was not really identified in the open-ended intercultural scenarios, where 20% of the students actually became more accepting of intercultural contact. And this is in line with literature that says that students go through a lack of confidence phase before they go back up, since they feel like now that they know more people from other countries, they know less. There was an overall lack of significant correlations at this point. However, participants in a formal program with an intercultural focus were the sole group with a reported increase in curiosity, openness, and appreciation of cultural diversity. Also, participants in an informal program had an overall drop of almost every single component, except English language skills, culture-specific knowledge, and adaptability, suggesting that informal exposure to multiculturalism actually has a more damaging impact. So this suggests that intercultural contact on campus needs to be formal, it needs to be structured, and ideally faculty or staff-led as much as possible, at least in the first year. Okay, I will quickly go through the post-intervention values, but you can see here that in general, there were some knowledge and skill-related components that increased over the 1 year period. Students on more multicultural campuses tended to increase more or develop more their intercultural competence, as did students who had less than 1 month, spent less than 1 month abroad. Students who had not spent any time abroad prior to the study dropped significantly. Also, formal programs rated better than any other kind of programs in terms of intercultural development. And this is a bit of a complicated graph here, but just to show you that I had assumed that motivation, gender, would all directly affect intercultural competence. But what really happened is that it affected students' confidence prior to enrollment at university. And that confidence in turn affected the university choice and their engagement with the campus. There were different kinds of encouraging factors. I don't have time to go through all of them, but students really valued group work, shared spaces, support from their international peers, and they felt that feeling confident and having interests really helped them. On the other hand, students who were placed in single rooms in dorms felt very isolated and less open. Also, they felt that when international students spoke more Japanese or became more proficient in Japanese, then their own intercultural competence decreased because they didn't have the opportunity to speak English or to act as mediators between the international students and the Japanese culture. Also, lack of confidence, anxiety, and worries played a role. So the implications here is that internationalization initiatives should be introduced prior to higher education. Also, introducing intercultural contact in a formal setting with faculty-led intervention is significantly more effective than just having international students on campus, as it is often suggested. 1 year interventions are also much better than 6 months ones. Students tend to feel less open, less respectful after 6 months, and then they tend to go back up at the end point. And finally, further interventions do need to be developed beyond the students' first academic year, since they felt that despite everything, they were still not very skilled at intercultural contact or knowledgeable about it. And finally, based on student feedback, of course, programs should be redesigned and optimized. And that is all from me. And I would take any questions now. Thank you very much.
Okay, before we do that, just want to get everyone to unmute yourselves, turn your microphones on, everybody. All right, and give a round of applause.
Thank you.
Okay, we don't have much time. Is there a quick question? You can use the put your hand up using the participants list. There is a question here from Stephen in the chat. So students usually go through an intense period of personal development during their first years at university. How did your research take this into account?
So in terms of student development, that was a point that was discussed in the interviews mostly. So it was not considered in the questionnaires, but it was explored during the interviews. And it was very interesting because they considered that intercultural contact to just factor extra into their personal development. They didn't see it as a parallel experience, but I'm growing more because I'm meeting people from other cultures. But you could realize from the interviews that there were sometimes situations with intercultural students that they had not been prepared for in high school and monocultural settings. And, you know, one of the things that really struck me is that we spend so much time preparing students for study abroad programs, but we don't prepare students for multicultural campuses. Students come in and they don't get any kind of orientation on how to deal with international students. But here they are in a highly multicultural environment that happens to be at home, and they're given almost no support beyond the make friends. And that was very shocking for me. And I think it was a point of anxiety for the students, is that they were not sure what to do in so many situations.
Okay, we're gonna have to wrap it up there. There are a few more questions. So what I want to suggest is that, Anna, if you wanted to take questions, there is a Hangouts room. If you go to Eventzilla, you could click on that. And if anyone, so we got questions from a few people.
Can I have a few more minutes? Like
no, we don't. No, I'm afraid we have to stop right there. So you can go over to the Hangouts room. In going back to Eventzilla, go to the Hangouts room. Those people who had questions, I see Brad, Matt, Fenty. It looks like quite a few questions. Okay, you'll have to take the questions over there. And are you able to go over there?
Yes, I will. Okay,
so everyone who had a question, please follow her over there. One more time, everyone, please unmute your microphones. We want to give one last round of applause.
Thank you very much.
For Anna Hofmeyr.
Thank you.
Very good. Very well done.
Thank you very much.
Okay, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. See you at the rest of the conference.
Yes. Bye-bye.